this event. We're going to start now talking about this subject. So yeah, I introduced Rupus. He's head of in charge of infrastructure and make sure that the platform works and the API works in 46 Elks. I'm in charge of telecom operator relationships and quality assurance. So I make sure that it actually, when we connect to a telecom operator or provider, that it actually works. So it functions well. And I take care of the pricing, etc., and all the fun things. So yes, today we're going to talk about basically convenience of using cool tools like Notion, Google Suite, Slack, Basecamp, what have we, ChatGPT also, and the concerns it brings related to GDPR. So what was our kind of journey here? So it's kind of a dilemma because we can choose to use easy-to-use tools like the ones that I mentioned versus self-hosted solutions that honestly are sometimes a hassle to use. So there are plenty of alternatives, but they're a hassle to use. So from us being a startup to a scale-up, we're going to go and cover that journey a little bit with you. So we kind of, Rupus started with using tools, any tool that kind of helped us have a better internal communication. And as a startup, we cared a little bit less about the privacy of sharing privacy in those internal channels, etc., especially in the very beginnings in 2011, etc., when there was no mentions of GDPR still. So can you explain, or can you kind of go through the first things we kind of started up with the GDPR and how it got started with implementing GDPR in our work?
Yeah, so we in the beginning we use different tools from different companies like Basecamp and Telegram and different messaging apps to communicate. And how we solved that while being a very small company was that we simply did not share any customer data on any of those platforms, which is a good thing to do always, but it's a bit inconvenient to not be able to know who you're talking about. So we solved that by having internal identifiers for different customers that we can look up on the servers, so we know which one we were talking about.
Yeah. So it's kind of we wanted to have a tool where we can freely talk about our customers without censoring ourselves within that internal communication. And we realized that if we want to do that, we have to introduce our own self-hosting systems. So, for example, for Slack, we started to use
Tulip.
Yeah, which is
the one
on the other side. Yeah,
which is a very great team communications tool. It's a bit like email, but instant messaging. Everything is threads, which is awesome. And the great thing is that it's free and open source. So we could host that on our own servers. So any data that we have interest in using, which is the GDPR. If you have any legitimate interest in using customer data, you can use it in your systems, as long as you tell the customer that you are. And having it on our own service means we don't have to have a agreement and a data processing agreement with other companies that we would be sharing that data with, which is a lot easier for us. We think for us it's easier to host our own server and not involving other companies in that.
Yeah, it's kind of easy for us because we are a tech company. So if we want to spin up a server and on our own infrastructure, and we want to install, for example, an alternative for Notion, we can do that. I can do that. We can all basically we all have the technical capabilities to do it. But the problem is, if you are kind of a startup and you want to use the convenience of these tools like Slack, what would you then recommend? What is their go-to in order to bridge that gap of, actually using sensitive data on Slack. I want to keep using Slack. What do you have to then do in order to keep using Slack?
Yeah, technically you'd need a DPA, data processing agreement, with Slack, but that's probably not an easy thing to get.
Can you explain what a data processing agreement is, and can you explain exactly what it does?
So that means that you have an agreement with a company saying that they will be a sub-processor of data for you. And you then have, of course, to inform the customer that you have the data from that you are using sub-processors. But when using other tools from other companies, it's probably the easiest if they don't have, especially like chat apps and stuff. It's probably easiest to just not share any customer data, any personally identifiable information at all. Because you will lose it, and you must be able to remove it, and on request from the customer, or when you don't need it anymore.
All right.
So we actually have for Zulip, we have a tool that actually searches for personally identifiable information and can remove it.
Yeah. So essentially, what will happen is we can put Zulip on, and we can put other tools that are we kind of host and that protect the data. But what if someone for the company or department actually wants to use Notion, and they kind of sneakily start using, I'm not putting Notion on blast, but whatever tool, how do we handle that? How do you work with that?
Yeah, if the customer, if someone on the company puts customer data on Notion,
they're putting customer data on Notion. They're using it extensively in order to get the work done.
Yeah.
And they want to do it, even though, like it says in our guidelines, don't do it.
Yeah.
They do it.
So at least in Sweden, what you need to do is realize that this is an integrity incident, and you will have to contact either. There are some guidelines about what you have to report to the authorities. There are, if you can say that this incident did not actually create any inconvenience for the customer, or did not risk ruining their privacy or integrity, then you can just remove it, document it internally, and make sure it doesn't happen again. If it's a bigger leak, if it's lots of customer data, or it's maybe sensitive data like personal identification numbers or health data or something like that, then you will have to, in Sweden, contact Integritetsskyddsmyndigheten, the Integrity Protection Authority, and they will come up with some sort of sanction probably, or just tell you that don't do that again or something like that.
All right. But you also should, and what we do in the company is kind of educate.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the best thing is not to leak any customer data. So what you need to do is to educate your team about what data you can share and what you can't, and on other tools that you don't control, you can't share pretty much any customer data if you don't have a DPA with that company to start with. And even then, you have to be careful what data you share, and make sure you mark it and know that where you have saved that sensitive personal data.
So far we had like a very black and white perspective here, but if we put it kind of in a hybrid, what would you recommend if a company actually wants to use these tools that are more convenient?
Yep.
How would you spread out the data? How would you recommend they do it?
Yeah, the best case is, or the easiest thing is probably get a CRM that you can get a DPA with, and though many CRMs have good tools to mark personally identifiable information and whether you've had consent to use it and stuff like that. So you can have all data in a silo saved somewhere, and it's only there. And then in other tools, you have to refer to that via links or something. That makes it a lot easier to then control the data and make sure it doesn't spread anywhere. And if the customer wants you to remove the data, you can easily do that because everything is in the same place.
Yeah. And also you could do we talk about the client, we have our own internal codes about the client that cannot be linked to the actual data. So internally we use convenient tools. But actually when it comes to real sensitive data, we use other tools for that. We kind of make a distinction there. And we kind of combine the convenience and the data privacy and the legality of it together. So one thing before we kind of try to close up and have questions is, can you explain those terms that are usually like you mentioned multiple times: data controller, data processor, you mentioned an agreement. Can you kind of make those three distinctions? What's going on there? Where 46Elks is also an operator. So what is our role there? But in general, like a startup, are they a data controller or operator? What is going on there?
So
what is it?
Data controllers are any company or part of a company that has gathered any personal data on a customer or a person, physical person. So anytime you have customer data, you are a data controller. You can also be a processor of that data if you process the data. That is, you save it and you do some work on it somehow. If you ask another company to do processing for you, they also become a data processor. There's also the issue with us being an operator. Operators have a special standing in GDPR, which means that there is the e-privacy directive in the EU that regulates how operators are supposed to handle data they get, because being an operator, you have infrastructure where your customers will be sending potentially personal data over your infrastructure, and you must be able to do that. Otherwise, it's pretty much impossible to have operators at all. So in the GDPR, there's an exclusion for operators that if the e-privacy directive covers anything that is also in GDPR, the e-privacy directive is the one that counts. So, for example, if we were to leak some data or something, and we have to report that to an authority according to the e-privacy directive, we report it to that authority. For example, in Sweden, that's the Post and Telecom Authority, instead of reporting that to Integritetsskyddsmyndigheten. But there's also the distinction because that's only regarding the data that we get from customers as part of being an operator. The data we get from customers themselves, for example, contact data about where we should contact if there is something wrong with a customer system or something, that's GDPR, because that's a relation between us as a seller and buyer. But the data they send to us as via SMS or via phone calls, that is a part of us being an operator. So that's another thing to deal with.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for explaining. And if anyone has any questions, we're very eager to try to answer them or discuss them together. So feel free to ask if you want, if you have anything on your mind. Or do we have anything from the chat, perhaps? No. Yeah.
Everything's crystal clear.
Yeah.
I have one question.
Yep.
Yeah.
GDPR. So, like under it, like how a person's data is protected. Like maybe my data like is being leaked, and I have no idea. Like I put the data, I have data on it. So how I will know it's like my data is being leaked? Is it like the authority, like the company responsibility to inform me?
Yeah.
Like yes, your data has been like leaked, or like you don't inform it.
Yeah. Try to repeat the question, kind of. So repeat the question.
Yeah. So if we as a company were to leak data, what should you do? And yes, you have to inform the customer what data has been leaked and how that might affect them in some way. And you also then have to report it to your local, the country's authority about integrity. So if it's a very big leak, the authority will probably maybe post something or tell the company about how they should deal with this.
So yeah, we have our own very a way we found ourselves in the GDPR world, and we are trying to have a very strict policy about it. So that's kind of our journey here. So basically, that's pretty much it. If you want to mingle later on and talk a bit more, we are welcoming you to do so. And yeah, if you have any more questions, perhaps, yeah, go on.
Like you talked about the two units, like if you have to do analysis or you have to work with data to provide data to some, it could be some third party or it could be your own organization when it comes to the data processing.
Yeah.
So let's suppose you want to do the analysis, that part, and you have to engage a third party company in that. So what kind of data can you share with that company? Like, is it like, can you share the personal identifiable information with them or not? So I want to have know a bit more about that.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's so the question is, if you need to use a third party to process data on a customer, what data can you share? And yeah, that's you can only share data that you need to share to do this processing. So, and you have a legitimate interest in actually using. So, for example, if you need only phone numbers for this processing, you can only share the phone numbers and nothing else. There's also extra rules regarding some data that's called sensitive data, like health information and social security numbers and such. And then you will have to have a special consent from the customer about using that and sending that to third parties. But as long as you inform the customer and they consent, especially with sensitive data, you should be able to use it. And there's also, you have to have a DPA with the sub-processor, the third party, to make sure that there's a contract in place saying what data they process, how they process it, and what happens if they leak it, and stuff like that, mitigations and so on.
In this case, like, let's suppose I have millions of customers, I have to take a consent from them that okay, your data will be processed via third party company. So I have to wait a lot.
Yep.
So how to manage that thing, because it's gonna be a long.
Yeah, that's it's difficult, and that's kind of the point with GDPR. It's to make that difficult and make sure that you have consent from customers to actually use it. I'm pretty sure GDPR requires active consent, so the customer must check a box or something and say actively that I'm okay with you sharing this data. It can't be just to use this service, you allow us to process your data and send it to other processors. I don't have experience with that kind of processing. We don't really do that kind of processing, so I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, it will be difficult. So you will have to, when the customer signs up, they will have to actively say to you that, yeah, I'm okay with sharing this data.
Yeah. Feel free if you have any questions. If not, we can continue hanging out a little bit more after this.
And feel free to test the pen plotter. You send an SMS and you get a picture. It's
also
fun.
Yeah.
This thing over there.
Yeah. So thanks everyone on the live stream. See you later, and thank everyone for joining in. Yeah.